Welcome to the playoff special of Free Tendies Fantasy. I'm here with Yanni. How's it going, man?
How you doing, buddy?
I'm just excited for some good playoff football. Hopefully these games are close and it's not a bunch of blowouts. But yeah, let's kind of just talk about what we're gonna do here. This is an experimental thing. We haven't really done this type of episode yet. We've been giving out picks all year, like against the spread. This is not going to be that. Me and Yanni are just kind of going over who we think will win each game and kind of how we see the playoffs going. We're not really going to track anything, but it'll just be kind of fun to, chop it up, talk about what we think about the games and who we have winning in each spot. But let's get into the first game. This one is going to be Saturday afternoon, I believe, and it's the Chargers going into Houston to play the Texans. We'll just do kind of like basic team stat breakdowns. So to start off, the Texans offense this year in the regular season, they were 19th in points scored, 22nd in total yards gained, 21st in passing offense, 15th in rushing offense, and then 26th in red zone touchdown percent. So when the Texans got in the red zone, they only scored a touchdown 49.1% of the time, which is 26th in the league. Then for the Chargers, they were 11th in points scored this year offensively, 20th in yards, 19th in passing offense, 17th in rushing offense, and 18th in red zone touchdown percent at 56%. Then for the defensive side of the ball, the Texans were 14th in points allowed, 6th in yards allowed, 6th in passing yards allowed, 11th in rushing yards allowed, and 27th in red zone touchdown percentage. They were averaging 63.2% of the time when the opposing team would get in the red zone, they would surrender a touchdown. Then for the Chargers defense, we got first in points allowed, 11th in yards allowed, 7th in passing yards allowed, 14th in rushing yards allowed, and they were the best team defensively in the red zone, only allowing touchdowns 45% of the time. The spread on this game is Chargers minus 2.5. So they're, I believe, the only road. Well, there's another road favorite, but it's not really. The Chargers are one of the road favorites of the week at the 5 seed of the wild card, 2.5 point favorites. Over under on this game is 42.5. So I guess we'll just kind of talk about the game. Yanni, you could just jump in or whatever, and we'll just chop it up back and forth on this really loose structure. To me, this game feels like a matchup of two offensive units that have really good quarterbacks and have just either faced injury or undertooled offensively. With the Chargers, obviously Lad McConkey has broken out this year. My fantasy champion stud, he won me a fantasy championship this year. Justin Herbert at points this year has looked really good, and at other points the offense and him have kind of been an afterthought. And then on the Texans side, they came into this season with so much optimism about what this offense could do, but CJ Stroud is really kind of, I won't say regressed as a quarterback, but his production for sure has regressed. We had Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs go out with season-ending injuries, so this Texans offense really is Nico Collins and like a bunch of nobodies. Joe Mixon added something to the Texans' rush offense. I feel like they've been better this year, but to me, this game comes down to a couple of different things. I think points are going to be at a premium if I was looking at the over/under. I think this will probably be an under game. That's how Jim Harbaugh likes to play. He loves to run the ball. Roman loves to run the ball, play good defense, that sort of thing. What jumps out to me is this Texans just inefficiency in the red zone going up against the number one red zone defense in the Chargers. I think that the Chargers defense has been playing over their skis for what their talent level is, but the Texans defense I think is underachieved at the same rate. So I think points will be at a premium here, and when the Texans actually have a good drive that is sustained and they get into the red area, I think that's going to probably tell the story of the game here. If the Texans have to settle for field goals, go for fourth and fours, that type of thing, I think they could be in trouble if they do not convert. For the Chargers offense, I feel like we kind of know what we're getting with them, right? I think they're going to want to try and establish it against a pretty good defense in the Texans. I think that Lad McConkey is going to definitely play a role. I think Justin Herbert should be kind of what we think he kind of what we think he is. He's a very good quarterback, right? So kind of a tough one to decide. I lean Chargers here though in a pretty close matchup. What do you think about this game, Yanni?
So I wanted to ask, at the Chargers -2.5 and the over/under at 42.5, what would you bet on both of those if you had to?
I would bet, since the Chargers number is pretty good and I lean towards that side anyways, I would bet the Chargers against the spread. And I think I would go with an under here, especially Jim Harbaugh playoff football. We've seen it as 49ers fans, right? A lot of those games can get ugly. And I think that the Texans offense, like at least this version of it, right? It's just not where anybody thought it would be. So
Yep.
that's my two leans, I guess, for like if we were betting it.
So I would smash the under on this game. Like, to me, I feel like the under is probably one of your better bets this week. Like, if we were doing our picks, I would be all over it. Um, I think, to me, the Texans win condition is actually pretty clear here. Joe Mixon had the largest road home splits of any running back in football this year. He's actually been like a top 5 running back at home and like a top 25 running back on the road. Um, so I think Joe Mixon, right? To me, that is the biggest thing I'm looking for in the Texans. Um, their passing defense or pass blocking has been terrible. They're missing Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. To me, it's as simple as, can they get Joe Mixon going? And if they can't, I think they're in really serious trouble. I think they're in really serious trouble anyway. I think it's going to be a really low play count game. I think the Chargers are going to sit there and grind the ball and play it out. We called it out a few weeks ago about J.K. Dobbins coming back and how different the offense looks with him. And we saw him go out there and kick people's teeth in when he's back. I think Justin Herbert coming back around in the playoffs, and I know Stroud is too, but I think Herbert, like, dude, he has to be more settled down, and he actually looked really good for the better part of his first playoff game. And the coaching staff difference too, right? Harbaugh versus D'Amico. D'Amico's the man. He's a great coach. He's done Super Bowl runs with the Niners, championship runs with the Niners, and now his own playoff run here. But I still think the coaching staff, it's not the same thing. Uh, yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know if they're willing to put. Do you think they'll put Stingley in the slot for
No,
Ladd?
no, I don't
No,
think
so
they
they
will.
don't do that. They don't do that, right? They keep him outside. So, like, I do think Ladd's going to be able to find his room. Dude, a lot of kicking field goals, and Kaimi was shaky toward the end of the year too. I like the under in the game a lot, and I do think the Texans are a live dog, right? Because I think if they can run the ball, and the Chargers have had enough kind of dud patches offensively, I think that's always a possibility. But I see too many ways for the Chargers to win, and I think you called this out in the beginning of the year. I think you were totally correct, dude. I think Stephon Diggs, had he stayed in this offense, was tracking to have a pretty spectacular season with the Texans. And, like, I think he was actually a really big part of what made the offense run as efficiently and smoothly as it was. And him and CJ had a really good chemistry. And since he's been out, like, there's too many things going against the Texans. So it's a pretty easy Chargers pick.
Yeah, and one more thing I kind of want to hammer home. I think that the perceived CJ Stroud regression, like there are people out there who are saying that Caleb had a better year than CJ, for example. Like if you're just like a box score watcher, that's absolutely, you could take that away from this season. I think that this Texans offensive line has been really injured and is playing poorly. I think that's probably the biggest reason we've seen such a drop off from them offensively this year. But yeah, both of our picks are going to be the Chargers. We are in agreement on this one. But it should be a good game. I do think the Texans are live to win this one. I just, I get what I think is a quarterback playing a little bit better right now, and a coach I like a little bit more than D'Amico. D'Amico's still a stud.
Yeah, just one quick. You don't have to go back to the slide, but just one quick thing about that game that I will say, because I know you and I are kind of in the same boat for Herbert. So I've been hearing this common thing that's been said a few times this week about there's the elite quarterbacks and Herbert's not one of them. That, right? When you're talking about those top 4 or 5 guys, I personally, and my understanding is you would too, I believe Herbert is one of the 5 or 6 truly elite quarterbacks in football. They were putting him under the category of guys who didn't really earn his contract. Like this morning when I was listening to sports radio, I will say that I think if you want to be considered that, like, Joe Burrow wins this game. Lamar Jackson wins this game, right? I think he needs to go in there and win that for him to not be one of those guys that you do wonder, did he get paid a little early? I don't know what you think about that. Do you think that's legacy defining this early for Herbert?
I think
Is that
the product on the field is clearly that of an elite quarterback, right? Herbert just doesn't have any of the accolades. I think he's only made the playoffs once or twice since he's been the starter of the Chargers.
Yeah,
They had
and
the
he's
epic
it's
meltdown against the Jags, which
yeah.
I put more on Brandon Staley than Justin Herbert.
Okay,
So,
fair,
yeah, I think we're going to see a new era here of Chargers playoff success with Jim Harbaugh in the building for sure.
fair enough. Okay, Steelers at Ravens, the team that me and Ted have loved to pick on all year, especially their fan base on Twitter. I got off Twitter a few weeks ago, but Ted has been keeping me posted. It has been wonderful to see their fan base getting exactly what they deserve after the way they talked all off season. But Steelers at the Ravens. Steelers offense ranked 16 in points this year, 23rd in yards, 27th in passing, and 11th in rushing, 29th in red zone touchdown percentage at 48.2%. The Ravens offense, third in points scored, first in yards, seventh in passing, first in rushing, and first in red zone touchdown percentage. Those of us who rode Derrick Henry all the way to a fantasy championship know what I'm talking about. 74.2% on the touchdown percentage when they get down there. And then the Steelers defense, always fantastic. Eighth in points against, 12th in yards, 25th in passing, sixth in rushing, 13th in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. And then the Ravens defense, ninth in points against, 10th in yards, 31st in passing, first in rushing, 11th in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. The Ravens have a 9.5 point spread in their favor, and the over under is 43.5. I'll just say right off the bat here, I would not take the Ravens at -9.5. I got burned taking them at, I believe, -8.5 this year against the Steelers. I learned my lesson. And actually, I got burned. Me and Ted got burned betting the under on this matchup earlier this year, but I would bet the under here. So I would bet the Steelers to cover a 9.5 point spread, but I would also bet the under again. I know the trend broke last time, but for the most part, that's been a rock solid bet. Ted can weigh in when we get to him. So I think I heard Dan Orlovsky breaking this down this week, and I think he's exactly right that Russell Wilson cannot, and actually Ted said this multiple times this year too. Russell Wilson is not capable anymore of picking apart the middle of the field in the middle of a defense and methodically doing a drive. The Steelers are basically, for the most part, run, shot, long shot down the sidelines, run, long shot to Fryermuth like 25 yards past the line of scrimmage, or like run, dump off, play action. Right? They're very rudimentary, and they're not really, it's not like highfalutin football. It's basically Russell Wilson can air it out, or they're going to try power runs or a dump off to Jalen Warren, right? Or a very basic play action. I think Arthur Smith is incompetent. I don't think he should be an NFL coach in any capacity. And I think that's really started to show the last few weeks. As they've been one of the worst offenses in football. They're really limping into the playoffs here. I understand there might be a temptation to cite, like, they have a Super Bowl winning quarterback, they have a Super Bowl winning head coach, and I think in the playoffs that is like worth a lot, right? And I understand that they put up a ton of points on the Ravens last time they played. I just, it really feels like their offense has taken huge steps back. I don't know what exactly did it, right? Because it's the same Russell Wilson. It's the same thing, but I wonder if teams keyed onto their tendencies, if they were too predictable, if they're not able to audible to these other things because Russ really doesn't have a lot of tools in his bag anymore. Um, I don't see any way, even with Zay Flowers being out. And I guess that's what makes it a little interesting, right? Is the way to exploit the Steelers defense is through the air, and you have Zay Flowers out, so that kind of does matter. But you have Mark Andrews, you have Rashad Bateman, and ultimately, to me, what this playoffs is for Lamar Jackson, I think a lot like LeBron carried sneaker salesmen to the NBA Finals, and it gets held against him that he lost in the NBA Finals when he had like Anderson Varejao as his starting center, right? Well, Lamar has, I think, carried some offenses to the playoffs that really had no business being there. I mean, there were years where like it was Rashad Bateman. I forget that other guy that flamed out there. Like he had nobodies that were catching the ball for him, right? And then Mark Andrews got hurt last year. I think the big difference this year is he has Derrick Henry. They have the best rushing attack in football. They have the best red zone attack in football, or well, not the best rushing attack. Actually, no, they weren't. They were number one. They have a top 10 passing attack. Lamar is bidding for his third MVP. I think Derrick Henry picks up that slack, and it's not Lamar go win us the game anymore. They have different things they can kick back on, and I think you see this multifaceted attack from the Ravens. I think they're capable of winning a bunch of different ways. I don't see any way the Steelers hang in there this week.
Yeah, I think we actually have a lot of different opinions on this game. And this is coming from the number one Steelers hater on this podcast, I would say. I think that Zay Flowers being out for the Ravens really changes the math about how this game goes, right? The first game the Steelers and Ravens played where the Steelers scammed their way to a win with like 6 field goals, I believe, right? They did a really good job of shutting down Zay Flowers. I think he had like 2 catches for 40 yards or something. He was basically a non-factor, and the Steelers did at least a pretty good job of containing Derrick Henry. I think that with Zay Flowers being out of this game, right? The Ravens objectively have, I would say, probably the worst wide receiver core in the playoffs right now, with Rashad Bateman as your one, and then because the Ravens decided to chase Deontay Johnson out of town, they're going to be having Tyrell Wallace running routes, right? Like a bunch of just complete no-name guys. So it's like you got Mark Andrews, Bateman on potentially a couple long shots, and I think the Steelers have shown that they can design a defense around specifically stopping the run. I look to the Eagles game when the Steelers played the Eagles. They did a really, really good job at stopping Saquon. It seemed like that was their number one goal in that game, and as a result, Jalen carved them up. Right? I think Tomlin comes out here. I think he says we are not letting Derrick Henry beat us, and it's going to be on Lamar Jackson to air it out, right? Like we look at the Steelers' defensive numbers, right? They're 25th in passing yards allowed and 6th in rushing. Like you beat that team in the air, ideally, right? With especially with their secondary struggling like it has been. I don't know how consistent it's going to be with Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews. I think Mark Andrews has a good enough chance to have a nice game. But I think the Steelers are live here. I'm not saying that the Steelers will win the game, but I think this is going to be probably a lot closer than a lot of people think here. That being said, though, I still like the Ravens here at home. I think that really what it comes down to is the Steelers' offense is just really terrible, right? And I'm surprised to see you throw Arthur Smith under the bus like you did. Honestly, I think Arthur Smith is doing the best with what he has, which is a over the hill quarterback, a bad running back in Najee Harris, and no weapons anywhere, right? You have George Pickens, who, I mean, he can have games like he had last week where he's 3 drops in one of the worst PFF rated games like ever, right? He also has talent, so it's not like he's a bum or anything, but I think that if the Steelers can get a couple of those Russ Moonball scams, right? Pickens maybe makes a nice grab, I guess. Fryermuth gets open for a cheap touchdown. Those TJ Watt like sack fumbles. The Steelers are probably. I've said this is not very. It's not a very sticky thing, but really with the Steelers team watching them this year, I was like, okay, I think I have to factor this in. The Steelers are so good at getting these impact plays on defense. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be close, and I think for sure the under hits here. So just to reveal the picks for everyone, we both got the Ravens either way. I think this is going to be a sweat, though. I swear to God, if the Steelers win this game, just get one
What
more
would you
skim in.
what would you guess for a final score? I think I'm dude in my head like I see like 20-10, like 2013. I think it's going to be like that kind of game.
I think maybe trying to do some math here in my brain, like 19 to 17. I think it's going to be really low scoring and really, really gross. Maybe the Ravens win it on a last second field goal. I know Justin Tucker has not had the best year. Like I'm not expecting him to miss like a kick here though. Like I don't
So
know.
just to clarify, you would take the Steelers plus 9.5 if you had to bet on
It's my favorite bet of the week. Actually,
it.
as
Okay.
disgusting as that feels, I think that is the best play.
No, dude, hey, being object. I think you're being objective. That's great. That's why I was
Yeah,
asking.
yep, yep. Go Ravens, please, please God, don't let them win. All right, next we got the Broncos going into Buffalo to play the Bills. I think that a lot of people are probably surprised to see the Broncos in here. Their season win total was at 5 coming into the year. They've done a great job. They've overachieved. They've been well above expectation, in my opinion. Bo Nix, I'm hearing some chatter out there that Bo Nix is potentially the best quarterback in this year's draft class. I think that's insane when you've seen what
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels has put on the field this year. But that sentiment is out there. Let's get into like offensive defensive breakdown here. The Broncos offense, when I was pulling these numbers, it was actually better than I thought for the Broncos. They were 10th in the league in points scored. 19th in total yards gained, 20th in passing yards, 16th in rushing yards, and then 7th in red zone touchdown efficiency. So they're scoring at a 62.5% clip when they get into the red area. Then for the Bills offense, I think everyone knows this is a great offense. They're second in points scored, 10th in yards gained, 9th in passing, 9th in rushing, and then second in red zone touchdown efficiency at over 70% of the time. Then for the defenses, we got the Broncos defense that is third in points allowed, seventh in yards allowed, 19th in passing yards allowed, third in rushing yards allowed, and then third in red zone touchdown percentage. They're only allowing a touchdown to the opposing offense 46.9% of the time. Then for the Bills defense, this is a defense I have a lot of thoughts on, but they are 11th in points allowed, 17th in yards allowed, 24th in passing yards allowed, 12th in rushing yards allowed, and 16th in red zone touchdown percentage, allowing a touchdown at 57.4% clip. The spread on this game is Bills minus 8.5. Over under is 47.5. So let's talk about this one. I mean, the Broncos have 2 wins over teams with a winning record all season, one of which coming against the Chiefs last week, who started none of their key players. So really, I feel like this Broncos team has been untested to a certain extent, right? I look at stuff like their points allowed. They're third in points allowed. I don't think they're the third best defense in the league by any stretch of the imagination. And especially when I look at this passing total, I think about standalone games this year where I've been forced to watch the Broncos. One of which was the Jameis game where he threw for like almost 500 yards and like 4 touchdowns or something insane. They're really thin in the secondary other than Pat Surtain, right? And I think the challenge is going to be for this Broncos defense, who does Pat Surtain match up against and does it really matter, right? The way this Bills offense has really been running this year, if you look at the box scores, there's not an alpha wide receiver that really jumps off the page. It's like a collection of guys. It's just mostly a collection of guys that happen to produce in any given week, right? There have been weeks where Tyler Johnson, the RB3 in the backfield, has been the leading receiver and gone over 100 yards. And really, I think this Bills offense the entire season really has just been a testament to Josh Allen's ability to go out there and make plays. We look at the second ranked red zone touchdown percentage, right? When you have a guy who has a cannon for an arm, is mobile like he is, and will just absolutely tank over people. He'll just truck people to get in the end zone, right? It presents a really difficult problem, I think, for a defense. So I'm not expecting the Broncos to shut down the Bills by any means here. And on the Broncos side, right? Like we look at their offensive numbers, it's decent, right? 10th in points scored, that was much higher than I thought it would be, right? Their yards gained are not so good, but their red zone touchdown efficiency is really good. So what that tells me is this is a team that they're not putting up 400, 500 yards a game, but they're really good when they get into the red area. Guys like Cortland Sutton, who are just big guys, red zone targets, have been efficient when they get there. To me, this game comes down to at least the Broncos offense versus the Bills defense. I think it comes down to what the Bills defense is built to do and what they're good at. I've said this at nauseum this year, but this Bills defense was built specifically to compete against Patrick Mahomes, in my opinion, in the postseason. So they have a lot of speed on that side of the ball, but they're also a little bit undersized. And I think that a team that has a really strong running game, a really strong power running game, can give them problems, right? When you can successfully run on this Bills team, grind out first downs, milk clock, not only are you controlling the ball, right, and controlling the game, but you're leaving Josh Allen on the sidelines too. We've seen Josh Allen at points this year put on his Superman cape and just take over games. So I think they're weak to a team that has a good power running attack, but I don't think the Broncos have that. They have their collection of running backs that Sean Payton rotates through. I don't see Javonte Williams or Jaleel McLaughlin really earning those hard yards in this one, right? So I think this Broncos offense is really just kind of Bo Nix making plays. And I think the Bills defense is really equipped to stop that with the way that they're built. It would not shock me to see a couple Bo Nix picks here. We saw him throw 3 picks against the Colts, right? Who are not even close to the quality of defense this Bills one is. So to me, I definitely like the Bills side here. If I was looking at the spread, Bills minus 8.5, that's high enough for me and a gross enough number for me to stay away. I would stay away from that entirely, and I might take the over on this game of 47.5, just because I think that this Broncos defense, while they have done a good job getting turnovers, making plays, like you're only going to be able to do that so much against the Bills. I don't think you're going to be able to stop the Bills by any means. So I like the Bills side here. What do you think, Yanni?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the game just to see like, look, dude, I want to see how far Bo Nix can go. Why not? It's kind of exciting. This is certainly the game where we're going to get a good answer to what his ceiling might be in the NFL. Right? He's going to the Bills to play a close to a juggernaut of a team. Really, I know they're not what they have been in the past, but they've also destroyed some teams this year. I think for me, the problem is the amount of times I've seen Bo Nix absolutely flail against elite defenses, and that we saw the Broncos really get beat up a few times when they got in there with like true powerhouse teams. I think the same thing happens again here. I think what you said is exactly right about the running attack. Weird for a Sean Payton offense to say, but they simply have not had it, dude, this year on the ground. There was that stat that was floating around for fantasy. I think it was in full PPR, Sean Payton has had at least one, if not two, top 25 running backs every year of his coaching career. And this year, they were all worthless, right? I think just because it's a collection of, I think Javonte Williams was talented before he got injured. He got injured. I think Jaleel's a nice player, but probably as a complementary piece, he can't be a lead back. Estime couldn't hold on to the football. He fumbled a few times. I think if they had a consistent rushing attack with how good their defense has been this year, they could at least make it interesting. Dude, Josh Allen is not throwing those turnovers he was the last few seasons. He's actually, I believe, had one of the most. They have one of the best turnover ratios in the last 20 years in the NFL. And I know the Broncos haven't lost the turnover battle since week 9. I get that. So there's like a little bit of intrigue there. But Josh Allen isn't really messing up. Uh, I, I I get it. They're third in rushing, right? So I imagine the Broncos are going to force Josh Allen to pass the ball here. I think that's going to be what ends up happening. I don't think they're going to be able to lean on James Cook. But I just think Josh is going to be patient. He's not going to make his mistakes, and they're going to force Bo Nix to come out there and match their pace. And there's just no way in my mind that happens. And I think we've seen Bo look really bad a few times against elite defenses. I think we see it again here. And the conversation about Bo being the best quarterback in the draft class, one is ridiculous because I think Jaden had a better season, just apples to apples. I actually think he's had a really good year. Like he's playing on a talented, depleted team in a really hard division. He got his team to the playoffs year one. Like they're playing under the salary cap. They're screwed with the Russell Wilson contract. I think that's great. You guys have to remember he played so much college ball. He's very close to his ceiling, I would guess, at this point. He kind of came out of the box at what he's going to be in the NFL. And that is not at all the case for Caleb. That is not at all the case for Jaden. These guys are young, they're studs, they have tools that Bo Nix simply doesn't have, right? So they're going to grow past him. But I do understand if you're happy with the year Bo Nix has had. I'm excited to see the game, but I do not think this one will be competitive. The only way I think it will be, I would say, just the win condition here, right? And as you can see, we're both going to take the Bills. The win condition here, I think, is going to, does Josh Allen throw a turnover early? Like, they came out and what did they go down by? 14 to the Patriots, 10 or 14 2 weeks ago. Does Josh come out and do something really weird like that? Do they get a pick six or do they get a sack, fumble, whatever? I guess maybe an early turnover might put them behind the 8 ball a little bit and force them to pass it more than they'd like to and interrupt that efficiency they've had all year. That's the only thing I can see happening, though. I would be stunned if this is like Bo Nix goes out there and puts up 380 yards. He rushes for 90 or 80 or 90 yards, and it's a slugfest that the Broncos come out on top of. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think that if this Bills team gets up over 2 scores, like
Yeah.
anytime before halftime, it's going to be tough sledding. I think you're right. The path for the Broncos' victory, I think, would be to kind of scam their way into an early lead, whether that's a Josh Allen interception, kick
Yeah.
return, getting a fumble, that sort of thing, and then kind of letting the game get squirrely. This Bills offense has shown they're willing to establish it with the run. They kind of rotate through their backs, or at least they were in the second half of the year. I wonder how much of that is like the offense saying this is the best way to operate in our opinion, and how much of that was keeping James Cook fresh for this run here.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see. James Cook had like I think he averaged the most yards per carry in the league. Um, so it'd be interesting to see what would happen if James Cook actually got full run. But both taking the Bills here.
Okay, Packers and Eagles, a game that I'm really interested in, and I think the broader NFL community should be interested in for a bunch of reasons. Here's the rundown. The Packers offense is eighth in points scored, fifth in yards, 12th in passing, fifth in rushing, and 10th in red zone percentage at 59.4%, red zone touchdown percentage. The Eagles offense, seventh in points scored, eighth in yards, 29th in passing, second in rushing, 13th in red zone touchdown percentage. And that is with missing their starting quarterback for a few games, although so did the Packers. The Packers defense, sixth in points allowed, fifth in passing yards, fifth in total yards, 13th in passing yards, seventh in rushing yards, and 20th in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. The Eagles defense, just a juggernaut this year, second in points against, first in yards, first in passing yards, 10th in rushing yards, fifth in red zone percentage. Um, I actually think this game profiles as a sneaky defensive game. I know after week one, you might be inclined to say it's going to be a shootout, but so me and Ted were talking a bunch, right? This was this the first game? No, it was the Ravens and Chiefs, but this was the first Sunday night game of the year
It was a
in Brazil.
Friday night one in Brazil. Yeah, yeah.
Friday night in Brazil. Okay, so it was after the Thursday night. It was a primetime game though, and me and Ted were obviously both watching because at this point the Niners were still alive. They weren't the corpse of the 49ers, so we were looking at these teams as potential championship matchups or whatever. And it was interesting. Both defenses looked like shit. The quarterbacks were throwing like hell, but people were slipping. The turf was really weird. I don't think that's in any way inaccurate. Like I don't think that first game maps at all onto this. The Packers hadn't really gotten Josh Jacobs going the way they were. They hadn't unveiled their full playbook to the extent that they have, right? All the kind of cool counters and whatnot we've seen with Jacobs. So to me, I'm actually just throwing away that first game altogether. And the fact that Christian Watson's out with an ACL matters too. Jalen Hurts got a practice in this week, so it looks like he's on pace to go ahead and clear concussion protocol and get in there. This is the most important game of Saquon Barkley's career. Is this the first playoff game of Saquon's career? Or did he have one when Daniel Jones went to Minnesota and beat them? Was
It,
he in or was he hurt at that time?
he was playing. I think they beat the Vikings
Okay,
in
so it's the
Minnesota.
second playoff game of his career, but by far the most important game of his career. This time it's going to be at home at the Eagles. I look. So Jordan Love also had some injuries, but he looks like he cleared them. He was a full participant today. I was telling Ted, right? I think I like Jordan Love more than Ted does, right? I think he's an old school gunslinger quarterback, and to me, that totally has a place in the game. I will totally watch a dangerous dope fling the ball around sideline to sideline and do insane things, right? But when it comes down to having no Christian Watson, what you're now going to ask him to do is pick apart the defense, make the right read 30 times in a row. I know trashing Brock Purdy is a popular thing right now, or whatever, trashing CJ Stroud. Dude, a lot of the time with these teams, when they lose their field stretcher for a period of time, you then have to make 30 correct decisions in a row, 30 snaps in a row against a professional team. You have to be right, bang, bang, bang. I don't think Jordan Love has that in him. And Christian Watson got wide open. He had like two targets that were like 30 or 40 yards down the field the first time in this game. He had like 4 to 6 red zone targets the first time they played. I think him being out actually really matters here. Dobbs is a nice player. I think Reed's a really good player. I think Wicks is a cool, wide receiver 4 or 5, but they're missing the guy that they use as their field stretcher, the guy that they use as their X. So I think they're going to go in here and they're going to try to be really physical, really run heavy. Josh Jacobs, again, probably the most important game of Josh Jacobs' career here, right? This is why they went and got him. This is why they paid him. This is why they've reoriented their whole identity around him. But we are talking about Vic Fangio here. We are talking about two monsters in the middle of their defense, right? For the Eagles, the whole Eagles roster is just so cohesive and so good together the way they work. I mean, when you can have backups coming in and out and backups to backups at the quarterback position, and you're still rolling however many points they put up the last 2 weeks, it was something ridiculous. Um, Dude, that's like everything that you want to see in the NFL. And I hate the Eagles fans, but I love the Eagles roster, dude. I think Eagles fans are the worst human beings on earth. All of you. Awful. But the Eagles players are fucking sick. And what does it mean when Saquon finally gets to go out there and it really matters what he does, dude? I mean, what kind of ceiling might we see from him? Um, God, dude, there are so many ways the Eagles win this game. Whether it's forcing turnovers from Jordan Love and going up early, whether it's just outright stuffing the Packers offense and forcing 3-and-outs, whether it's running the ball all over. If they need to get in a shootout, they're more than willing to do that. They did it week 1 against them. I know I said it doesn't really apply, but still, they've shown they can do it. They've done everything this year from tip to tail. I think it's way too much. I think it's way too much for the Packers. I love Matt LaFleur. I think he's an excellent coach. I love Josh Jacobs. He's one of the most underrated players in the whole of the NFL. I like Jordan Love, and I think their defense has really nice players on it. I don't think they can get it done here, though. I think they get overwhelmed. I think they might get overwhelmed pretty early. I expect to see a huge Saquon game, right? It's just for a lot of reasons. I'm very comfortable. I would smash the Eagles at -4.5 here. I would probably smash the over at 45.5. I think the Eagles have a good chance to go for 35 or 42 points here. If they really let it go, if they're not up by so much that they have to keep scoring, I don't see any reason why they would not just keep scoring.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one, right? I feel like if you're trying to pick this game, you have to make a couple like judgment calls, or like just kind of what you think about each team, right? To me, Jalen Hurts coming off the concussion, right, and I think he had a pinky on the injury report 2 weeks ago. That worries me. That worries me for a team that has one of the lowest neutral pass rates in the league. Actually, the Packers have the lowest neutral pass rate, and I think the Eagles are second and third, right? So both of these teams really want to run the ball. The Packers' pass rush is actually very good. Guys like Rashawn Gary can get in there and just absolutely ruin game plans, right? So I think when you look at it, the Packers are seventh in rushing yards allowed. I don't think they're. I think that number is a little bit more impressive than what that rushing offense actually is. But I wonder, Saquon, he's kind of like obviously he's had one of the greatest years of all time, right? 2,000 yards on the ground. Really had a chance to beat Eric Dickerson's record if he wasn't resting last week. But I think you have to decide if you think the Packers will have success stopping Saquon in any way, shape, or form. I think that at points this year, we've seen teams when they really key in on trying to stop Saquon, and that's really all they're trying to do. And like the Redskins did it once Jalen went out. The Steelers did a really good job of it. I think that Saquon, he is like a big chunk runner, but he also gets stopped at the line of scrimmage a lot too, right? So if this Eagles team finds themselves in like third and long, and Jalen has to drop back after not playing for like 2 weeks and coming off a concussion against this Packers pass rush, I'm worried. I'm worried about the Eagles drop back game, right? Because Jalen holds the ball too longer than any quarterback in the NFL. It worries me. I don't think this Packers team is going to be able to stop Saquon though, or at least limit him, like other teams have. So I still lean the Eagles here. And on the Packers side, when I look at a lot of people are down on this Packers team right now over the past month. Like but I think what they've done is they've decided, hey, you know what, Jordan Love, you are a little too crazy for our liking, and we're going to run the ball at nauseum until we're forced not to, right? We've seen the Josh Jacobs usage be crazy since week 9 of this year. The Packers are willing to just grind it out, like rush 30 plus times a game. They'll do that. In theory, that's how you beat the Eagles defense, right? Best passing defense, first in first against the pass, I guess, in yards allowed, 10th against the rush. In theory, that would be how you would want to attack this, I think. I don't see the Packers letting Jordan Love drop back and potentially risk him messing up the game without Christian Watson unless they get down big, right? So if this game is staying kind of close, I think it's just going to be run Josh Jacobs, maybe a short Jordan Love throw, try and minimize the error there. But I don't know. I think this Packers defense is a little worse than what the numbers say. I do have my worries about Jalen Hurts, but I would still take the Eagles here. Nick Sirianni in the Eagles. I almost forgot to talk about the huge coaching advantage Philly has. While Matt LaFleur, he is a smart fella. He doesn't rile up the boys like Nick Sirianni. I'm taking him here in this spot. All right, next week,
Vibes over
vibes guy, total vibes guy.
Silver scheme. Yeah, man. Why not?
All right, this is, I think, the hardest one to predict on the week. It's going to be the Redskins going into Tampa to play the Bucks. When I was going through these numbers, some of these figures actually shocked me. But the Redskins offense, they are fifth in points scored offensively on the year, seventh in yards gained on offense, 17th in passing, third in rushing, and then fifth in red zone touchdown percentage. They're converting at a 63.4% clip. Then the Bucks offense, they are fourth in points, total points scored on the year, third in just total yards gained, third in passing yards gained, fourth in rushing yards gained, and fourth in red zone touchdown efficiency. They're scoring at a 65.7% clip. So they are this Bucks offense with Baker Mayfield and Bucky Irving and Rashad White and Mike Evans is top five in every single metric you could possibly think of on offense. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the Redskins are 18th in points allowed on defense, 13th in yards allowed, third in passing yards allowed, which that was shocking to me. 29th in rushing yards allowed though, and then 22nd in red zone touchdown percentage. They're allowing a touchdown 60.4% of the time opponents get into the red zone. Then for the Bucks defense, we've covered this a lot this year, but it is a banged up and not very good unit. They're 16th in points allowed, 18th in yards allowed, 29th in passing yards allowed. That's why we told you every single week start your quarterbacks against the Bucks. Fourth in rushing yards allowed, which is actually better than I thought they were. And then 14th in red zone touchdown percentage, allowing a touchdown to opponents 54.4% of the time. Spread on this game is Bucks -3, and the over/under on this game is 50.5. We'll just fire this off. I would go over 50.5 here. I think that these are two elite offenses against two very suspect defenses. We have two very exciting, in my opinion, quarterbacks in Jaden Daniels and Baker Mayfield, and I think this is going to be the type of game where the last team with the ball probably wins. We'll start with the Bucks offense, right? We know that Mike Evans is a legend, right? He's going to have an opportunity to pass up Jerry Rice for the most consecutive 1,000-yard seasons next year. Obviously, losing Chris Godwin hurts, but I mean, Baker's done just a magnificent job this year. I think he's had like 45 or 46 touchdowns, passed for like 4,500 yards. He's had a prolific year passing. I get that the Redskins defense is third, but I think that's more a function of them just bleeding yards on the ground, right? Marshawn Lattimore, since the Redskins traded for him from the Saints, I believe he's played like one quarter of football and has been sidelined the rest of the time. We actually are going to get our Marshawn Lattimore versus Mike Evans matchup this week, which is very exciting for you Saints and Bucks fans out there, for all 10 of you. That's been like a fun matchup for the past 5 years, really. Whenever the Bucks and Saints would meet, they'd always get in a fight or start jawing at each other or whatever. I'm kind of excited to see. Hopefully, Marshawn Lattimore still has it, and it's an interesting matchup. But with the way Mike Evans is playing, I like the offensive side there. And then really what I think changes the math for this Bucks offense is the emergence of Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving over the past 6 weeks of the NFL season, it went from Todd Bowles saying he would ride the hot hand between Rashad White, Bucky, and Sean Tucker to it being Bucky's job with the complement of Rashad White on the side, right? I look at the Redskins 29th in yards allowed rushing. I think Bucky is going to just absolutely tear a hole through this Redskins team here. He's been playing his best football at the tail end of the year. I would expect a heavy dose of Bucky Irving in this one. I don't think they're so I really just don't think the Redskins are going to be able to stop the Bucks in whatever capacity. For the Redskins offense versus the Bucks defense, obviously the Redskins offense, right? I think that passing figure, 17th in passing yards gained, I think that's probably underselling how good this passing attack has been at points this year, just because Jaden will keep it and run the ball. That's been such a good play for them. This Bucks defense, I don't think the way they're good at stopping the run is with guys like Vita Vea and then plugging up holes in the middle, right, and kind of bullying the offensive line. Jaden Daniels just he's so fast and can move so quickly outside the tackles, right, and gain yards on his own. I think that Jaden's going to get his right, and I think that Terry McLaurin obvious. There's a very good chance I think that he gets one of those long to two just massive monster touchdowns here against a Bucks secondary that's just terrible. So really, I think what this game probably comes down to me is which team can get those one or two stops, right? Which defense forces a turnover or which offense just gives away a turnover, right? I think points are going to be coming at a flurry here, and losing out on a touchdown and even one possession could be the difference in this game. I think Baker, he's gotten a little loose with the ball this year. I think Baker's more of a gunslinger than Jordan Love, honestly. He's gotten a little loose with the ball this year, and we've seen points where this Bucks offense has looked weird for whatever reason. I still think that even though Jaden has had a super exciting season, that he's probably more likely to have the weird game here, just because like outside of Terry, like who does this Redskins team have, right? They're still throwing the ball to Zach Ertz. They got Olamide Zaccheaus, Noah Brown. It feels like they're probably one off season of drafts and free agent signings away from them being having the same type of weapons the Buccaneers do. At this point, I lean the Bucks here. I wouldn't bet them. I would stay away from this game entirely. You couldn't pay me to bet this game because I don't have a read on it. I like the over though, and I like the Bucks. Baker to get it done for his third career playoff win. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, so if you guys are playing DFS this weekend, like I will be, I would try to stack this game, and the stack I would try to do is Bucky versus Terry. So I would try to have any of your rosters. I would make sure to get. I would pay up for Bucky. He's going to be extremely expensive, and I would get Terry in there because I think I think the way those two play off each other this week is really well. So try to make sure you fit them into your rosters. Um, for the game, you'll see in a minute here. Maybe I see it a little differently. So for me, I know the Bucks have been incredible offensively. Ted goes when he was doing the slides and doing his little research. He goes, "Dude, I think you're going to be." I did not know that the Bucks had performed at this level here, and I agree. But I think when you look at stretches of the game, the Cowboys game and the Saints game specifically, two of their last games in the last 3 weeks, something was off with the Bucks. Like I don't know what wasn't clicking with them, but they didn't look right to me for like long stretches of both of those games. Okay. And during that time, the Skins have been absolutely tearing it up. Jaden Daniels has been one of, if not the best quarterback in the fourth quarter this year. He's thrown multiple game winning or game tying touchdown passes as a rookie. And then one interesting thing about the Skins, right? I think they've been reluctant to run the read option plays with Jaden because why would you want to sit there and get him beat up during these games? I think we see a lot more read option, quarterback sweep, those kind of plays. Vita Vea in the middle is what makes the Bucks so effective against the rush. They have been their whole career. That dude's a human refrigerator in there, right? One of the best D tackles of my time watching football. And that's not where the Redskins, I think, want to attack him here. I think you're going to see those sweeps. I think you're going to see read option plays off the edge. I think you're going to see zone run plays to the outside out of shotgun, right? That's kind of what Cliff likes to do. And I think we see a much heavier dose of Jaden on the ground than we have all year, right? Because you don't want to you don't burn that stuff in the regular season, but here you absolutely do. I think the Skins go in there with nothing to lose whatsoever. I mean, they had no business making the playoffs this year. They were picking two last year, and now they're doing this. I think Terry McLaurin's most important game of his career. I really love this theme of the playoffs, by the way. If you guys can't tell, I keep touching on it. These like old school, productive, I guess they're old school now, right? Once you're a few years into your career, these productive veteran players that are wily vets that have been some of the best players in the NFL that haven't really gotten a chance to show it over the course of their career because of the team around them. I love that these guys are all getting a shot to do that this year. I think that's maybe one of the most interesting things of the whole playoffs, right? The Derrick Henrys, the Saquon Barkleys, the Terry McLaurins of the world. But I think Terry absolutely feasts on this secondary. And I wonder, man, do the Bucks come out and have just the one or two stalled drives, man, against a really good defensive mind, right? Uh, I'm taking the Redskins for the upset. I think they're the most live dog this year. I love the Bucks. Ted's been giving me shit for not being a Bucks fan, but we saw last week, right? It's that weirdness, man. It's the same reason I wouldn't bet them at minus 14 and a half against the Saints. The Saints are a dog shit team, dude, and they had to grind to get that win. They did. The Cowboys are playing on their backup quarterback with nothing to play for, and they beat them in a must-win game when the Bucks are pursuing playoff seeding. I think we see some high flying offense out of Jaden and the Skins. Now, maybe the moment really is too big. Maybe we finally do see Jaden's ceiling, which is as a rookie with a far less talented roster, with a far less experienced coaching staff. Maybe we finally see kind of what his ceiling is and what the ceiling of this roster is. I think that's possible, but I like them to, if they need to get in a shootout, I think they're right there with them. Like you said, I think it comes down to who has the ball last, but I also will not rule out the Bucks look weird on offense and all of a sudden find themselves down 10 or 14 points in the second half, and they can't lean on Bucky anymore. Bucky could potentially get game scripted out of this, and then I think the Bucks are in serious trouble. But if it's a shootout, I still like them, right? So I see more paths to victory for the Skins. They are my favorite dog of this week, and I do think they win and get the advance.
Yeah, it's been I feel like both of these teams like have had these weird like just flops out of the gate, right? Like the Redskins lost to like the Cowboys. That was the one where I think they scored like 20 points in the last like minute of regulation or something
Yeah,
crazy, right? Like Jaden absolutely has shown that he's so clutch. When Jaden
yeah,
has the ball with a minute left and you need one score, it feels like almost automatic with him at this point, which is like to me something that like that's veteran quarterback stuff, right? Like that's a guy who's been in the league for 4 or 5 years and is like
yeah.
just dominant. So I don't know, man. I this is the pick I have the least amount of conviction in, but I just feel like both of these teams are so there's a lot of variance with both of them, right? That it's like home team. I give that a little bit of a bump, right? I give Baker's experience a little bit of a bump. But we'll see. I think that regardless of who wins this game, like whoever wins this game, or even the loser of this game, both of these teams just have to chalk up this season as a massive success, right? The Redskins going from worst to playoff team in their division, right? The Bucks coming back from a 4-7 record, I believe, and like after they lost to the 49ers to making the playoffs, surging past the Falcons, even though they lost two to them. Either way, you got to tip your cap to both of these organizations. I think bright futures for both. But yeah, I'm still gonna have to ride with the Bucks.
Okay, Vikings at Rams. I think well yeah, the yeah, God, the Bucks game's really hard to pick. This one's really hard for me too, to be very honest with you. I see this going so many different ways. I don't have strong conviction at all on it. Okay. It's now being played in Arizona, a little bit different. We saw this with the Niners during COVID, right? That's sort of their neutral location. But here's the deal with the matchup. Vikings offense is ninth in points scored, 12th in yards, sixth in passing, 19th in rushing, 19th in red zone touchdown percentage. The Rams offense, 20th in points scored, 15th in yards, 10th in passing, 24th in rushing, 25th in red zone touchdown percentage. The Vikings defense has been significantly better, 5th in points against, 16th in yards, 28th against the pass, second against the rush, 18th in red zone touchdown percentage. The Rams defense, 17th in points against, 26th in yards, 20th against the pass, 22nd against the rush, fifth in red zone touchdown percentage. That is their bright spot there. So, I mean, right off the bat, you may notice that the Vikings are bottom five in passing defense. The Rams are more than happy to air the ball out. I actually think that's a huge factor in their favor here. But ultimately, I think with the Rams, they do want to run the ball quite a bit, and they do want to be Kyron Williams centric. Basically, every single time they've had a chance to this year, they've pounded the rock, right? And I think that's not going to be as available to them this year. Flores does a really good job against the rush. Ted knows what narrative I'm going to call out. It's been a point of contention between the two of us. I think Flores has a really good system to deal with the Shanahan scheme. And I know McVay's passing scheme is much more developed than Kyle's is. It's a different system now. It's grown on its own. It's its own thing. But he is in essence in the same tree, in the same core foundation of their offense, right? I think Flores plays these teams really well. I think the Vikings all year have just had these marquee wins against this system, and here they go again, right? The Rams offense too. It's weird. I mean, people have said, like, does Matt Stafford need to get warmed up in games? Is he getting too old? They just had these weird sputtering first halves, and then they come out with their hair on fire in the second half. Can you afford to do that against the Vikings? If the Sam Darnold that shows up against the Lions last week shows up, sure. I mean, look, Sam Darnold last week looked like the moment was way too big for him. He looked like he could not handle the hostile crowd. He wasn't making pretty clear reads, even though Aaron Glenn did a very good job, I think. There was also a lot of that was on Sam. It was his worst game of the year. Do you want to go into this game coming off your worst game of the year where you got beaten a big moment with a noisy crowd? And all those things are going to be here again. And look, Stafford's a Super Bowl winning head coach and one of the greatest Super Bowl winning quarterback and one of the greatest quarterbacks of his generation. That dude has been in the zone for like 12 or 15 years, however long he's been in the league, right? He's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league for more than a decade. Um, that's a pretty big factor in this, right? Super Bowl winning head coach Sean McVay. I'm not sure if O'Connell was in his coaching tree. I think he might have been. I don't remember what the order of all the guys is, but I want to say O'Connell is from McVay's staff.
KOC was his
So
offensive coordinator.
he was his offensive coordinator.
In 2021, that was the year we went to SoFi. He was the OC on that team.
The year we went to, so okay. So like to me, dude, that really does matter. Like you're getting it, I don't know what you want to say, an apprentice and master game or whatever. We've seen this with Kyle and Sean. Ultimately, everything that guy know at one point was taught from Sean. So it's like there's a lot of factors here. I think that you could say if you want to say that the Rams are going to pull this out, I don't hate that at all, right? I really don't. I think there's a lot going on here. I did what I'm betting on in this game, right? What my feeling is I think Sam Darnold's game last week was a one-off. I think he still had a little bit of that weird shit in him, and I think he left it on the field in Detroit. That's at least my feeling about it. I look, if the Sam Darnold that was making Addison a top 5 receiver for the better part of the last month comes out, if the Sam Darnold that was airing it out to Justin Jefferson, he was pinging Hawkinson all year. Aaron Jones has been great out of the backfield. I think for the most part, Sam's been an excellent quarterback this year, and my feeling is that he comes back and does that. But dude, if Sam plays at even 70 or 80% of his ceiling, if he's at 80% of what his ceiling's been this year, all of a sudden you could have a game where the wily veterans come in there and they kind of show the Vikings that they played way above their pay grade this year. I'll let Ted weigh in from this point on. This game is very hard though, man. I totally understand picking either way.
This was the only game that so full disclosure, I just sat in my office yesterday and kind of hammered out my picks. This was the only one I changed my pick on. This was the only one I slept on it and was like, no, I think it's the other way. To me, like when you look at the Rams' offensive numbers, right? Like, yeah, they're pretty good at passing. The rushing, like yes, they get a lot of passing yards, but a lot of these other figures are not great, right? 20th in points scored. They're bottom like 7 in red zone touchdown percentage. Not great running the ball either, right? And to top that all off, Matthew Stafford, I believe he's been sub 200 yards for his past 3 starts. I don't know if he was just gearing up for the playoffs or whatever. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo go out last week against the Seattle Seahawks to throw for over 300. So I think you got to make a couple calls on this, right? Like one of which is, do you think that Matthew Stafford can take advantage of this Vikings gimmick zone blitz thing, right? Like 28th in yards allowed on the Vikings defense, that's not very great. We've seen quarterbacks that when they have like when there's a good scheme to beat it, like you can throw on the Vikings defense for sure. I know that everybody loves this Vikings defense. I'm much lower on them than the market, but I look at the way the Rams offense has been playing, like really over the past month or so, they've been winning because of their defensive success, not their offensive success. I just I don't know, right? And then I look at the Rams defense versus the Vikings offense, right? This Rams defense is not good at anything except for red zone touchdown percentage allowed, right? 1 out of 2 drives their opponents have get into the end zone. So you can kind of look at that and be like, oh well, they're bowing up at the right time, right? Like I don't know. I think it's gonna have to be Sam Darnold. I think we're gonna see this week, right? Because Sam Darnold last week in the red zone, he was like 1 of 10 passing for 2 yards or something. The Vikings were absolutely atrocious in the red zone. I think that the points are gonna be there as long as Sam Darnold kind of does his job, right, and makes the right read. I just don't. I don't like this Vikings team at all. I've said all year I'm willing to fade them, but I think this is actually a good matchup for them. What really swung me all the way over to this Vikings side for this particular game was that it's not going to be in SoFi anymore, right? You fight all season to to win your division and get a home playoff game. Then all of a sudden, last second, you're going to Arizona. The Rams already didn't have a very strong fan base to begin with. It would not shock me to see more purple in like Glendale than Rams fans at this point. It's really a bummer for the team. Like I'm not sure how the players will react to it, right? Sometimes you have like these tragedies that happen in your city and the teams rise up for it, right? Like we have I remember, do you remember that Monday night game, Yanni. It was like the Saints versus the Falcons way back after Katrina, and like the Saints were terrible up until that point, and they just boat raced like the Falcons, and it was like the ultimate feel good story, right? Like you could have that, but also it could just be shitty feeling, right? Who knows how many players like had their shit burned down, right? Like you just don't know, right? So that coupled with losing home field advantage, then by the numbers, right? Like it's just, are you betting on the wily old veterans to turn it up at the like in a clutch time, which they could do that, right? Puka's really ascended this year. Cooper Cup has kind of fallen off a little bit. I just like more of the pieces surrounding the Vikings a little bit better. So that was my pick, as well as Yanni's pick.
Dude, I'm surprised. I'm surprised you said slightly more Viking. I would expect this game to be like 70% Vikings fans. I think
Well,
it's going to be like 2/3.
it's tough, right? Because it's so far away. Like when the Rams had a home playoff game, we were able to go because it was just a 6 hour drive for us, right? Like Minnesota people, like they gotta get in their car. They gotta either hop on a
No,
bird or something and like
no,
get
no.
down there. It just seems like how many Vikings fans are living in Arizona, right? Like,
Well, okay. Think about this though. Do you know how much cheaper airfare is to go to Arizona than LA?
well,
Like
yeah.
I would say this game just became a lot more affordable. And then I don't know how it works with tickets, but I would assume that they just open up all the tickets, right? So I would assume that you get refunded if you bought tickets at SoFi, and then the tickets are open for purchase here. So like I don't know, dude. I think you don't think I think it's going to be 70%. We'll see. I mean, I'm curious, but I think it's like overwhelmingly this is a Vikings home game.
I certainly don't feel like the location of the game favors the Rams at all.
No,
Yeah,
no.
it's not home field advantage. They got screwed. They got absolutely screwed with the timing and everything. Uh, Wildfire in January, like
In a
fucking weird.
city, no,
Yeah.
a wildfire in a city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the games. We're just gonna show you guys our brackets and kind of where our picks and how like if it happens the way we think how it would lay out, right? This is my Super Bowl bracket brought to you by Free Tendies Fantasy. Based on the picks that I made, next round we would have the Vikings matched up against the Lions, just like MCDC said. See you in 2 weeks, and then we'd have the Eagles in the Bucks. So the Bucks would come into Philly, and it would actually be I think the Bucks had beat Philly the last 2 times they played, so I think that might be pretty interesting. Then on the AFC side, it would just be the third matchup between the Chiefs and the Chargers, and then we'd have the rematch of the Week 3 blowout of the Ravens and the Bills.
Yeah, and I would be so excited if this is our second round matchup, but because I have the Skins pulling out the upset, it would be the Skins going to the Lions at home for the Lions. I think that game would be incredible offensively, and then in the other game you would have the Vikings at the Eagles. That one not so much, I don't think. Right, that would be a bummer of a matchup in my opinion if that's what we get second round. And then I have the same bracket as Ted does on the right. I'm really interested if any of the dogs are live here. To me, this feels like an overwhelming favorite weekend. I'm taking one dog, but like I wouldn't be surprised at all if at the end of it it's it was favorites chalk. We'll see though, man. I actually think this year was so top heavy that we're going to get a really great round two. Maybe this round isn't so interesting, but I think the teams at that next level and all these matchups are going to be really, really exciting. So I'm excited for everything.
Oh yeah, and that's gonna do it for us. If you watched the video, thank you. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell, helps the channel out. We thought our season was over, but we just couldn't stay away for the playoff
Indeed.
madness. Let us know in the comments who you got between the Bucks and the Redskins, because that was the only thing we didn't agree on this week. And we will
Yeah.
see you next week for the divisional round.